Ladies and gentlemen, we are right back, just like you. Well, the events of 2020-2021 transformed relationships between customers and companies, employees and employers. It first, if you would want to feel actually a reckoning, new needs, new behaviors, new expectations, and there's been no going back. And definitely there's no slowing down at the same time. How does this leap into the next 5 years of digital transformation? Looks like I am at least very, very intrigued to be knowing. And of course, from one of the best from the academia, actually, our keynote speaker for the day is an academician, has been really kind to join us virtually and has crossed oceans virtually to be speaking to us at this summit. Of course, it feels very, very empowering to have all of you having stayed back till this, till the evening hours. And of course, we'll be rounding up with this final session for the day. So why don't we just very enthusiastically welcome her as well, right? Let's give it up, some happy, happy applauses. Let's welcome Linda Hill, the Professor of Business Administration, straight from Harvard Business School. Linda, if you're all set, handing it over to you. Very, very good evening as well.
Good morning. It's a privilege to speak with you today. I just wish we could be together, but of course the conditions in the world are such that we can't be. I do hope you, your family, and your colleagues are as safe as can be expected. I'd like to talk with you today about research I've been doing for almost 20 years. I've been looking at the connection between leadership and innovation, because although there's a great deal of research on leadership and a great deal of research on innovation, there's not much that looks at the connection between the two. And I've been interested in men and women who have built organizations and ecosystems able to innovate time and again. About 7 years ago, I decided I needed to start a parallel set of studies. And my research is very in-depth and very longitudinal. I tend to observe leaders and their colleagues as they go about their work. I decided I need to look at digital transformation because it was very clear that leaders were beginning to rely on digital assets to help drive innovation. So we began to do that work. And of course, COVID happened 2 years ago. So I decided that I can't go visit. So let me begin to use other methods of research. So we began to do executive roundtables all around the world and to do survey research. We ended up speaking with over 200 executives in 36 countries and also surveying another 1,500 in about 90 countries. So what I'm going to talk with you about is what we've learned from that research. I'm going to start by talking about our survey results, and then I'm going to share with you two of the experiences of leaders who've made really a lot of progress in doing digital transformation. So the first thing we did in the survey is we asked people how important was digital transformation to competitiveness. And as you can see, almost 100% said extremely important. They also said, though, that in fact, if we're going to be able to take full advantage of these digital assets that we're putting in our organizations, we are all going to have to change our mindset. We're going to have to change our behavior. And you see 72% said that. So then we asked, well, how long have you been on this journey? And you will see that it is a long journey and it's also a pretty challenging one. In North America, we see that most leaders have been on this journey for some time now, at least 5 years. They've started, they're moving along. Even those companies that, if you will, were born digital, find that they have to do transformation because we see that new technologies are emerging ever more fast. So how long does this journey take? What we see is that, in fact, it takes quite some time, and it's not a one and done kind of thing. Even digital first companies find that they have to continually evolve because the technology continues to evolve even faster. You will see if you look at this chart that most companies have been at this journey for some time. North America is a little further along than other parts of the world. But I will say that what you see in the emerging economies is that they're able to leapfrog. They don't have some of the legacy systems of the more developed economies. And consequently, for instance, they're going straight to mobile. So we do see, though, it's not an easy task. It's a long task, mostly because it's not simply about putting in the technology, but it's about changing the mindset and behaviors of the leaders and the staff. So where do leaders focus their attention when they're doing a digital transformation? This slide captures the sense of what they're paying attention to. And as you can see, there's a lot of focus on the customer, also on technology infrastructure. A lot of that is about the cloud and various kinds of process improvements. They spend less time on the employee experience and also less time on cultural transformation. But what we see in our research is that those leaders who do spend significant time on the employee experience and on cultural transformation are actually progressing faster than those that don't. So what are the organizational characteristics of a digitally mature organization? What does it really mean? What's the aspiration? Here you see what people told us were the top characteristics they're trying to develop in their organizations. And just to summarize what you see here, basically what these leaders are telling us is we want to build organizations that can use data to make decisions across the enterprise to meet the evolving expectations of customers. And for sure, what you see, there's lots of work to be done. There's been the most progress in terms of customer focus, but in terms of this data-informed decision-making, long way to go there. And also in terms even of employee empowerment, so that the employees, again, will be acting in ways that they can actually utilize the data, long way to go. Now, we also asked, if you're going to build an organization that has those characteristics, what mindset and behaviors do you need of the leadership? And as you can see, these were the top characteristics that we heard about. You may notice there's nothing here about digital literacy. Now that truly surprised us because we thought this was all about digital. That is what we'd find ourselves talking with executives about and what they'd be writing about in the survey. But instead, you see, what we need to all be is adaptive, creative, curious, comfortable with ambiguity. Now, digital and data savvy and literacy does matter. Here's the long list, and what you'll see is it's number 5. So yes, leaders say we do need to understand something about it. We do need to have some basics, but you know what we need to admit, particularly senior executives, we are not digital natives. We didn't grow up with digital. And you know what? I don't know that we can really master it enough. Instead, what we need to do is figure out how to collaborate with the younger generations who did grow up that way and collaborate with those who have digital expertise. Again, because it's changing all the time, it's not something that we're going to ever be able to master. Instead, what we need to do, again, is to learn how to bring those people into the C-suite, if you will, to work with us about the challenges, the possibilities, and help us understand together what should the organization be doing. So it was fascinating to us that leaders described, one leader of a very major company, thousands of employees, said, we've been bringing in 22-year-olds, this is a consumer products company, to try to understand really what they expect from that end-to-end customer experience. So you see the list here is mostly about, if you will, emotional intelligence or the soft side. Now, we did collect these data in the last year. So one of the things we may be seeing here is also the effect of COVID. And when I go to share with you some of the stories of leaders who are actually in the midst of doing these kinds of transformations, we'll see that I think the need to be adaptive, the need to be prepared for the unpredictable, and working with ambiguous data under complicated circumstances. People are very aware that they need leaders who can do that, and the leaders are very aware that they need to figure out how to do that. And that is not necessarily comfortable. We heard that a lot of leaders do not feel a whole lot of psychological safety these days, because to actually behave in the way you see here means that they need to make themselves more vulnerable. And that's not necessarily what they're used to. One of the leaders also said to us, you know what, I got to come out of my bubble, and I'm really going to have to learn how to learn with all the different generations in my workforce who seem to be kind of different from me if I'm going to be able to create an organization that actually is agile, that actually can innovate and meet the needs, if you will, of our customers, many of whom are, guess what, also of some of those younger generations. So this is the list. Now, what I said to you is that what we begin to see is that, frankly, even though everyone tells us new mindsets, new behaviors are needed, not a whole lot of attention is being paid to culture or to the employee experience. Now, there are some leaders who are doing that differently. And what I want to share with you now is what we're learning from our more in-depth studies. And we have done research looking at this connection between leadership and innovation and the role of digital in the countries that you see here. In fact, this is the in-depth research, as I said, with the surveys and the executive roundtables, really about 90 countries. We've also looked at leaders in a range of industries, and we've also looked at leaders who are in government and the not-for-profit sector. One of the things that we're seeing is very important about digital, but it was only a little dot in terms of focus, is that people are understanding that organizations cannot go it alone. Again, I think that COVID and what we've been going through has helped us understand that. Organizations are understanding that, you know what, our communities expect us to behave in ways that really support the community, because business has a role to play in that, and we have to take care of the people in our communities. What stakeholders are expecting of us, very different. So it's not only about being able to innovate sometimes within our own, if you will, company, but it's actually being able to innovate with partners. And I'll talk a little bit more about that. So I want to tell you a little bit about Dr. Rakesh Suri. Dr. Suri was kind enough to allow me to come in and study his organization as they were going through a digital transformation. As you can see, he's at the Cleveland Clinic, Abu Dhabi. This is one of the greatest medical institutions ever, and it's a joint venture between Cleveland Clinic and Mubadala, the sovereign wealth fund of Abu Dhabi. So they were moving along and they had to get things done, and they were actually making progress and meeting all the various objectives that they hoped to meet. So I called him in March of 2020, and you all know what happened around March of 2020, because we were supposed to have our update about what was going on with their digital transformation. And Dr. Suri said to me, I don't think you want to talk about digital, Linda. I suspect you want to talk about COVID. Now, COVID was sort of more in the awareness of people in Abu Dhabi at that time than of, if you will, the people sitting in Boston, Massachusetts. In fact, I was going to take a vacation in Africa, going on safari. Dr. Suri said to me, Linda, this disease is operating in very unusual ways. This is not going to be short. This is going to be a marathon with many sprints. Now, when he said that to me, I got to tell you, it didn't mean anything to me, really. I thought, oh, we're going to have a problem until the summertime or something. I didn't know what he meant by it, but now I really know, because obviously he meant exactly what we've been going through. But he said, you know what, Linda, I feel like I'm leading through a fog. The stakes have never been higher, but I feel like I'm leading through a fog. And what does it mean to lead when you can't see, when you have no vision? He said, my first instinct was to try to take charge and steer the ship. This is his ship, fabulous ship, to get all the caregivers to go where we needed them to go. And I was glad that we had digital tools to help with that, because we had some data to help us work through some of what was going on. But guess what? The data is very incomplete and very ambiguous, because this disease isn't operating the way we're used to. He said, you know what, I began to understand, Linda, that my role was not so much to take charge and to try to steer the ship, but instead, I needed to figure out how to hyper-empower my people, hyper-empower them. I need to convince them that there's no longer anything called business as usual. Nope. I need to create an environment in which they're willing and able to be agile, willing and able to innovate and do what's necessary to save our patients, ourselves, and our country. So that's what he said his task was. And he said to me, I have to admit to you, Linda, this is not easy for me. I'm a surgeon. When I see blood, my instinct is to stick my finger in it and stop the bleeding. But again, that's the wrong thing for me to do if I'm actually going to hyper-empower my people. And in fact, he described having a sparring partner who actually observed his behavior and helped him, and even a coach, figure out how to maneuver. And thank goodness they had digital tools, because they had to go to telemedicine. Thank goodness they had digital tools so that he could actually, if you will, lead the organization from his home, because he ended up in quarantine for 14 days. And what he found in terms of the digital is that he needed to figure out, how do I lead from my home? How do I lead through a camera like this? How do I tell people and share with people what they need to know and hear so they can get through this crisis? So that's what we heard a bit about, what it felt like to actually have to lead. And thank goodness we had digital tools to help with that. Now, the leader I spoke to and the leaders we've studied over time began to realize that if we're really going to take full advantage of all of these digital assets we're putting in place, we need to make sure that the whole organization uses them to create a new experience for our customers. We can't just have a group over there that's responsible for digital or innovation. Everybody needs to be a part of the game. So just like Dr. Suri said, all of my caregivers need to understand we got to deliver on what we should deliver, and we got to deliver on what we could deliver. Now, if you're not delivering on what you could be doing, a competitor will come in, they will close that opportunity gap, and it will simply become your performance gap. So what we see in organizations that are doing these digital transformations, at the same time, the ones who are progressing are telling people, I don't care where you sit. If you're the janitor in the hospital, if you're a physician, you must think about being a value creator and a game changer. And we're giving you tools to do that. So the nurses were given tools to do visualization. I think the tool, actually, I'm not trying to advertise, was Tableau. And the nurses, when COVID hit, began to do A/B experiments to figure out what really works best on their wards because they need to be more efficient. Now, they didn't really see this. This was so easy and so user-friendly. They began to come to management and say, you know what? We could be doing this. I've discovered this by using these tools here. And they began to call the digital team, there was one, obviously the experts, and saying, you know what, you're not giving us the information we really want or need to do stuff, or we need you to think about presenting it to us in a new way. So you begin to see collaboration between people who used to be kind of afraid, if you will, of data and digital, and actually thought, you know, I'm not going to be able to do this, to people who were fully embracing it to talk about not only what they should be doing, but also to help them deliver what they could be doing. And they needed to do those coulds if they were going to get through COVID. So what you see in organizations as they go through this digital transformation, who think about culture and capabilities, they really want everyone to know that everybody has a role to play, that innovation is anything that is new and useful. It can be a product, a service, a business model, a way of organizing, a way of cutting costs. It can be incremental, it can be breakthrough. Everybody has a role because they want more people in the organization to be prepared to be in box one. What we see instead in many organizations, even to put in all these tools in, because they haven't worked on the culture and the capabilities, they may have lots of people who are in box two, maybe, maybe not, but they don't have as many people who know how to be in box one, who know how to work on the coulds. And those tools actually can help you move to box one because you have data that will help you figure out, are you progressing? Are you getting done what you need to get done to allow you to do those experiments and learn together with your peers to figure out how you can operate in the most effective way for your customers, or in this instance, your patients. The other story I want to tell you about also has a little bit of a COVID spin to it. And I'm doing that intentionally because we all know that we're kind of worried about this and what's going on there. So all of you know Michael, even though you think you may not. In fact, some of you may have his product running through your body. Michael is the leader who runs the global supply chain at Pfizer. He is the person who leads the team that literally ran the trials, if you will, all around the world to bring hope to us. And in fact, they made, if you will, as they put it, they made the impossible possible. And Michael understands that he didn't do it alone. He did it with all of his colleagues. And going back to that ecosystem, as you all know, they worked with a company in Germany to actually get the technology. So again, you see partnerships happening to bring hope to the world. So Michael let me begin to study him about 6 years ago as he began his digital transformation. And this was the first phase of the transformation. He wanted to build what he described as an end-to-end digital and physical supply chain that was patients first, that met the needs of the patient. Now they began to make all the tough choices, and they had legacy systems, and they were trying to get into place systems that moved from hindsight, as he said, to insight to foresight. And they were working on this for many years. Now he found out that this part was actually easy compared to getting people to use these tools to make a difference to patients. And he began to think about, how am I going to change the culture and the capabilities? And what we see in organizations that actually have people who are using, if you will, these tools, is they have three capabilities: creative abrasion, creative agility, and creative resolution. Creative abrasion is about being able to create a marketplace of ideas through debate and discourse, because you need a robust pipeline of ideas sort of work through to figure out what you're going to do next. So that's the first one. And so what you see in these organizations is they have to get people to figure out how they're going to speak up. They got to get the ideas out. So what they say is, yes, you need to inquire and actively listen to others, but you also need to be prepared to advocate for your point of view. You also need to be able to be open to contrarian points of view. As one person says, you argue as if you're right, but you listen as if you're wrong. So creating that marketplace of ideas is the first piece. Then you need to be able to have an organization that can be agile. And this is really about, can you do those experiments? Can you test and experiment and learn and pivot quickly? And then finally, can you make decisions? Can you make decisions in a way that you really take full advantage of all the learning? And that means more both and decisions as opposed to either or. So it's not so much that you're going to let the bosses or the experts dominate. Nope. You're going to have a more inclusive and patient way of doing decision-making so that you get all those voices. But you know what? Decision-making is going to be, the decision-making rights are going to be really clear to everybody. But everybody can have a voice in all of this, and you're not also going to compromise. You're not going to go along to get along. This kind of goes back to creative abrasion. These are very, very deeply interconnected. Now, I want to show you the data for Michael's organization when they were sort of 2 years in on their digital transformation. He let us collect data on the culture and these capabilities. And so just to tell you, green is good, yellow is in the middle, and red is not so good. Now, I want you to look at creative agility for a moment. This is where most organizations start when they decide they want to, if you will, be more innovative. They start with agility. So they introduce lean startup or design thinking or just agile principles to do their work in a different kind of way. And I know you all know what those all are about. To help the organization learn to experiment, reflect on those experiments, and then make the adjustments necessary. So one of the things that Dr. Suri said to his people is everything we're doing is a working hypothesis. It's a working hypothesis. We're not going to act on rumor. We do have some data, but guess what? We're still going to have to make judgments. So it's not that it's data driven, it's data informed, because you still need your judgment to figure out what those data mean, because they don't tell you everything, and some of them are ambiguous. Some of them might even look conflictual. At least we have it because we've been involved in this digital transformation. But once we make those decisions, based on our working hypotheses and the data, we're not going to know if we are right until we see the impact of those decisions. So the real key is going to be how fast can we learn what that impact is and then pivot if we need to. And that's what adjusting is. Now you'll see Michael's team is not so good at experimentation. And part of that is because they're quite regulated, right? And they really, really care about our safety as we want them to be. So that part of it is a little bit tougher to learn how to do, but they're getting better at reflecting and better at adjusting than they were, because this is sort of data. This is the second set of data we collected. You also see that they actually know their customers very well. You see customer intimacy. And that comes because what we see with almost every leader who's leading a digital transformation successfully is they make sure that people actually do know the customer. And more importantly, they make sure that the whole organization has a sense of shared purpose about serving that customer. So back to what you saw with the digital transformation, yes, you want to focus on what's that customer experience. And it's the whole experience, not just the product or the service you provide, but everything that touches them. So at Procter & Gamble, where we're doing a study of the head of R&D there, and she said, we have to innovate on how we innovate. Everybody needs to play, everybody needs to be in box one, and everyone needs to love the problem of the consumer. We got to love that, so we got to know. And she put in place, if you will, lean startup as a way for them to get to learn how to experiment and incubate with their customer to be able to create products and services, no, experiences that would really, that the consumer would just absolutely fall in love with. Again, data was a whole part of that story, but she said, Linda, the hard part is getting this culture and these capabilities in place. So if you look at Michael's team again, they're not so good at decision-making. That is what creative resolution is about. They don't have the right people in the room. That's what right locus means. And you know what? They're not doing both and. So what they begin to do is they begin to work on creative abrasion. And what you can see here is they now have a marketplace. That is, they have cross-functional teams, cross-geography teams, where they can actually abrade and really unleash and fight a bit and see what are the best kind of ideas for us to test. They also have more diversity of thought because over time, they were adding more people as they were growing globally and also digital capabilities. And they were building partnerships with their vendors. Vendors are no longer vendors, they're partners who you actually want to make sure you use those digital tools to bring in a little closer to you so you can be agile and use them. And finally, though, the thing that they're not good at is they're not good at conflict and debate. And why aren't they good at that? Because they deeply, deeply respect, expertise, and they're polite. We're polite. So they don't ever want anybody to feel bad. So even though I'm on a cross-functional team, if Linda's idea, we've been testing and it's not working, I really don't want to kill it because I don't really want to hurt her feelings. That's her baby. So they had what they described as many walking zombies all around. We were spending money on things that everybody was really not so happy with, but no one wanted to kill Linda's project. Also, basically, they would say, okay, yeah, this is a cross-functional team and we're supposed to do X, but it looks like it's more in Dave's territory, or this is his expertise. So I'm going to let Dave drive this. So fundamentally, they weren't really collaborating within these cross-functional teams because they were deferring to the person who seemed to, this mattered the most to, or knew the most about it. So instead, what they were doing is they were escalating these decisions. They didn't make them because they knew people weren't saying what they really believed. They escalated them to senior management, and senior management saying, well, why are you bringing these to us? We've empowered you and you have the data now, right, to make those decisions. You don't need to come to us. Well, one of the things that happened is eventually some of the middle managers said, we're tired of this. We can't work this way. This is a waste and we don't really have that many resources to get done what we need to get done. This, of course, I should tell you, this was in 2017. What I'm describing to you, and they've been on this journey for 2 years. It took them 2 years to have that deep sense of shared purpose and to know the customer. And so what ended up happening though, is someone said, these middle managers, you know what, we'll take this on. We have to stop this behavior. We have to begin to behave in different ways. And so those leaders, among other things, did something that they called straight talk. And everyone got a straight talk coin. And this was something they were doing across Pfizer. They just really adopted it in a big way. And the straight talk coin was when you put the coin, if you're having a discussion with a group of people and they're not really saying what they think, you can put this coin down and say, what does, you name the patient, what does Paul, that pediatric oncology patient, what does Paul really need us to be talking about today? Why aren't we talking about what Paul needs from us? And everyone's attention is in, right, okay, customer centricity. Let's look at the data. Let's think about what we need to do relative to what Paul needs from us. And actually, after many, many different ways, they came up with training for everybody. They took it on and discovered and worked on it themselves. And in the end, this is what you see. So in 2018, we collected data about what the organization looked like. And you can see they actually made a lot of progress on creative abrasion. And that really was the initiative of middle managers, designing training for all of them, not just, if you will, even for the bosses. And in fact, at Procter & Gamble, they hired coaches for the C-suite. And the C-suite was told, you know what, you make too many statements, you're not inquiring enough. We want to look at that ratio. And eventually, the C-suite decided there were 4 questions they wanted to always ask. What did you learn? How did you learn it? What else do you need to learn? How can I help? So with those kinds of very micro kinds of changes in the behavior of leadership, you begin to see things like the culture beginning to move. Now, they're still having a little trouble with creative agility and resolution. But what I want to tell you, this is what it looked like in January 2020, right before, or they knew about COVID in December, but right when we were all becoming much more aware of it. And you can see how much progress they made. And you can see what's green is purpose. Now, I will tell you that in 2019, they actually did get to a place where purpose was all the circles. But what's happened between this time is that the group of people, the group has almost doubled in size. And a lot of that has been outside the US. So building culture and capabilities away from the headquarters is always a harder task, as well as embedding that culture and those capabilities down to the front line. So what you see is, and what they would tell you, is if we had not made these shifts in our culture and capabilities, there is no way we could have run those trials in 266 days. And they literally say to each other, you know what, we need to have a little bit more creative abrasion now. We've got to have a little bit more conflict because we're not pushing ourselves to actually get to the place we want to be. And now when people were initially afraid of data, afraid of technology, they would say to me when we first started talking, oh no, I'm not. In fact, they thought innovation was all about technology. And since I'm not a technologist, I'm not really supposed to be innovating. No. That's not what innovation is about, anything that's new and useful. So what ended up happening is they had all of these awards for people who did innovative ideas and got them implemented, because just because it's creative, it's not useful and it's not used, then guess what? That's not an innovation. They began to see that everyone all along from the top to the bottom became these innovative problem solvers, and therefore they could become much more agile. And for them, a large piece of that was getting much better at creative abrasion. Also, we have found that organizations have a whole lot of trouble with doing decision-making in a way where they don't let one group dominate, either the bosses or the experts, but instead have that kind of patient, inclusive kind of decision-making that I described earlier, also really across geographies, because one of the things that actually allowed Pfizer to do what they did is that they had built this strong culture across geographies. And in fact, they've been onboarding and growing as they needed to with COVID, opened up whole new operations in places like the Philippines, virtually. But because they were clear about their culture, their values, et cetera, and what they were trying to do, they were very deliberate about how they brought people in. So we're collecting data to see how things have progressed, but without this kind of culture, they would not, in capabilities, they would not have been able to use those tools that have been put in place. So really what I want to say now is that what we see is leading digital transformations really gave you some sense about what it means to be digitally mature. But really it means we got to change the way we do our work. We have to change our mindsets and our behavior. Lots more I could tell you about how that happens. But what we're really seeing is that unless we as leaders are willing to transform ourselves, this stuff doesn't work. And as one leader put the transformation, what you're really trying to do is move from being a leader who has a vision, who says to people, follow me to the future, to a leader who understands that instead their role is to create an environment in which we are going to co-create that future together. And that shift in mindset is not at all a trivial one. It's a very complicated one for leaders to work through. And we saw it and heard it from leaders all around the globe. And the nature of the challenge of doing that kind of varies because there are national differences in people's expectations of really what good leadership looks like. And so in fact, what good leadership looks like sometimes gets in the way of these leaders making the shifts they need to make if people are truly going to use these digital tools to make a difference. So I just want to end, and I don't know that we had this quite right, but I tried to put it together to talk about what people find really challenging about leading, if you will, a digital transformation. One is you kind of need to be really determined and persistent. This is going to take a long time, so you've got to be quite deliberate. And guess what? Stuff's going to change along the way, so you also have to be agile. So you may think you were going to go this way, but once you get the data in and it tells you need to go that way, you need to be agile enough to move in that direction, but still give people that sense that we're kind of going somewhere. And that shared purpose actually helps you make these choices about when to be determined and when you actually need to move and pivot. The other one that is really clear is this distinction between, do we do things in a more centralized, enterprise-wide way? Because to do the end-to-end experience, often you want a more centralized kind of structure. But in the end, if people are truly going to use the tools, they need to be adapted to the various circumstances, their function, their country, et cetera. So you need to distribute that authority. The other thing is we all need to upskill our talent and develop them. But frankly, you are going to have to bring in some new talent, some new capabilities into the organization. And the question is, how do you bring in those people in a way that they know, yeah, you're the expert, but you're supposed to be able to collaborate with the rest of the organization and develop user-friendly tools and really answer the questions they think need to be answered if you're going to make a difference in that customer experience. The other piece is this whole issue of experience and data. It turns out that when you introduce data and when you say data-driven decision-making, in many organizations, you create resistance. What do you mean data-driven? Are you trying to say that those data are more right than all of my experience, than my expertise? Not, but you should be using those data. Decisions you need to have evidence for your point of view. So you shouldn't just say, I'm Linda, I'm the expert on whatever it is, so listen to me. People can say to you, okay, Linda, that expertise, that worked then, or that's your experience, but we're in a different situation now. People are allowed to question you, going back to inquire. It doesn't matter where you sit. And you need to give them, well, what evidence do you have of that point of view? And the data are part of that evidence. So data informed works much better than saying data driven, because we're still making judgment calls. And the other thing is, if someone makes a proposal and it doesn't fit what your part of the organization needs, you can say, that works maybe for you all over there in sales, but it doesn't work for us in manufacturing. can we spend a little bit more time in terms of that creative resolution, seeing how we might adapt that answer to come up with, and we have data that can help us with that now, so that in fact, we'll be able to meet our objectives as well. And then the last one, which is a really, really tough one for organizations, is really to think about the end-to-end experience. Organizations have core competencies that are usually represented by their current products, their current services, and you're trying to sell those. But as one leader said to his team during COVID, this is not a time to sell, this is a time to serve, to get to know our customers, because now they're different. They're not who they were before COVID started. So yeah, we have this, but we need to go out and get to know them in an intimate way to understand and love their problem, not ours. Love their problem is what they said at Procter & Gamble. And we need to answer and address their problems, not the ones that we have solutions for. And so moving to customer centricity is really difficult when in fact you're being terribly squeezed, as organizations have been. Some organizations have benefited, if you will, from the pandemic. The top line has grown, but for many others, not quite the contrary. The margins have become squeezed. So for sure, really moving to customer centricity as opposed to what you already have to offer is a very tricky paradox for most leaders to lead their organizations through. And then the last thing I want to say is what you're trying to do if you're trying to use these tools, and one of the real opportunities that come with digital assets is you actually can build different kinds of partnerships with the government, with other private entities in your organization, if you can put them on some of the same platforms. And with the APIs being that kind of structure, that is what we see in these organizations that are more innovative. They're actually, again, building out those platforms with important vendors, maybe with important customers. So again, that everybody can move together, which means that your team, if you're going to bring the future to the present and use digital that way, that your own team or your own organization needs to always bring the outside in, have that point of view. And in fact, in Pfizer, when they were trying to rethink that whole end-to-end customer experience, they never call patients customers, so they'll forgive me if they hear this. One of the things they did is they brought in Delta Airlines. Now, Delta Airlines is providing some of the best customer service in the US. And because they think about the customer experience, if you will, now from the curb, if you will, until you get where you're going and get home, that point of view is the point of view that they did design thinking kinds of activities, in that global supply chain with them to think about how do we rework the experience and therefore our work processes. And now, again, the digital tools are really helping us because we can do things in a much more customized way because we are on these different new platforms. And now we just need to make sure we understand how to work together and understand how customer expectations are changing. So by talking to Delta Airlines, they begin to think, oh yeah, what do patients expect now as compared to 10 years ago? And what they expect things to be easy. They expect whatever it might be. So the last thing I want to say is there's this real opportunity with digital to build out these ecosystems in ways that you can tackle problems at speed and with scale. And that's what we see leaders who are sort of at the forefront of digital transformation doing these days. So I hope I've given you some food for thought, but for sure, leadership has always been hard. And frankly, it is getting harder. But the good news is, yeah, you need to be creative. So we saw that as listed as something you need to be, but it's not just about you being creative. How do you unleash the talents, the passions of everyone in your organization to get the new? And then how do you figure out how to leverage to harness those for serving the purpose that your organization is trying to serve? And you as a leader are trying to use yourself as an instrument to create the kind of environment where you've hyper empowered your people, because people really want to be challenged. They want to have an opportunity to work on coulds and not just shoulds. And so the other thing we're beginning to see, and I don't have proof of it yet, is that those organizations that operate in the way I'm describing to you, they're not losing as many people because talented, passionate people want to work on coulds, not just shoulds. They want to know that they're making a difference in the world. Thank you so much for your time and attention, and I wish you all the best.
Linda, thank you very, very much for the pertinent keynote address that you just rendered. Thanks a lot. Some very good vibes on the screen, along with all the knowledge that we just assimilated. Ladies and gentlemen, during COVID or now entering the post-COVID times, what do you see as the major challenges about connecting with business stakeholders. Now you know about the leap 5 years, going forward. What are the critical capabilities required to enable secure, connected digital experience for your customers, your employees, and also your partners? Have you implemented any IoT or connected devices initiatives to meet the business requirement? What is the critical factor for the sustainable initiative to be successful? Well, I would like to believe, ladies and gentlemen, that this summit answered all these questions and way more, than the intention that we came forward to attend it. But as they also rightly say, that knowledge is not enough, we must apply. Wishing is not enough, we must do. We know for a fact that it is all in the doing, and proactive over reactive any day. Agility rules the roost. So now you know which experiences and which technology to render, to go for. So we would like to believe it feels more sorted. I would like to say a big, big thank you to all our speakers for taking the time out, for also taking the sustainable tech democracy, I would say, to a newer level with this summit. Time, ladies and gentlemen, to once again express our gratitude and our acknowledgements to our fabulous partners. Let's do it with a round of cheer as we are rounding up. Thank you to our presenting partner, Kyndryl. The Economic Times Virtual Tech Summit is co-powered by IBM, our innovation partner, Dell Technologies, our platinum partners, Cloudflare, Commvault, and Hitachi Vantara. Our gold partners being Manage Engine, Micro Focus, STT, GDC India, Tata Communications, VMware, and WiseTech. Our associate partner, TechWave. Thank you to all of you for being such a support. And yes, now the final thank you is always reserved, the most special one, to all of you for joining the Economic Times Virtual Tech Summit, especially while putting your participatory hats on. I could see that in the form of tweets. We could see that in the form of the virtual huddles at the engagement zone, experience zone. Our partners also loved hosting you at the technology booths out there. So thank you so much. We loved hosting you. You are the enablers of technology. Stay tuned for more experiential happenings from our side. Ciao for now.